On and we are recording with the one and only Miss Clare Lopez on Thursday, June 30th, 2022 at 4:04 p.m. Eastern Time, episode 855, 6. I have no idea. Something. Ms. Lopez, please introduce yourself for all the new listeners.
It's good to be with you again, Tommy. I'm Clare Lopez, of course, Lopez Liberty LLC, and very happy to be back with you on the program again.
All right, so what's going on in the world? What's dark and negative and pessimistic, and why is the world on fire? Let's go out on a positive note before 4th of July.
Well, I think we might like to look for something more positive at the moment, beginning right here at home. Perhaps we can look at the Supreme Court and some of the decisions that have come out recently, indeed just this past week. And what it seems like, if there is a theme to their rulings, it seems that the new majority, if you will, on the Supreme Court, and those include, of course, the three appointments by President Donald Trump, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, and then joined, of course, by Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, and sometimes, once in a while, the Chief Justice, John Roberts of the Supreme Court, too. But what seems to be emerging with that group is a reorientation, a recommitment to an originalist, textualist interpretation of the Constitution. In other words, take a look at the Roe v. Wade decision, for example, which really isn't about abortion per se. It is about, instead, the division explicitly named in the U.S. Constitution between those enumerated powers of the federal government and all others which, according to the Constitution, belong to the states and or to the people. So I think that's a positive trend, that this group now of justices on the Supreme Court are going back to not the recent past, but perhaps some time ago. Antonin Scalia, of course, a champion of that kind of interpretation of the Constitution before he died. But going back to that kind of thinking, just one other example maybe was this decision about the authority of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. I was
going to ask that, yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. To make rulings that affect and obligate states to certain actions. And here again, and that decision was just, I think, today, right, earlier this morning. It was a decision that that is a regulatory body that does not have, total authority to dictate to the various states what their state policies shall be, even regarding environmental issues. So I think that's a positive trend.
Was the decision made? I knew it was on like the docket or whatever.
I believe I heard that this morning, that the decision was reached, that it is an overreach by the EPA, a government agency, to make decisions and impose obligations that are not encoded in law by the Congress, by the legislative branch.
You got to give
by the states. It's an overreach, and so those decisions must be returned to the states and to the people.
You got to give kudos to their ability to spin it in the news. How the Supreme Court ruling will gut the EPA's ability to fight the climate change. CNN. New York Times, court decision leaves Biden with few tools to combat climate change. Reuters, U.S. Supreme Court limits federal power to curb carbon emissions. Yeah, okay, yeah. But on now is, if I'm in my completely uneducated mind, there's probably nothing I understand as little as law. But I read that the importance of I read earlier this week the potential of this outcome was that it wasn't going to be just the EPA. It was the precedent being set that is going to, no pun intended, supremely gut federal powers. The
Well, I mean, we
precedent
have to wait and
lies.
see for any
Sure.
further cases and, rulings to come down. It's possible, yes, that this could be setting a precedent. And as I've said, I mean, the point that I'm making here is that it does seem this group on the Supreme Court, 5 anyway, maybe joined sometimes by the Chief Justice, maybe sometimes not, but the 5 anyway, returning to an originalist interpretation of the Constitution, a textualist reading of the Constitution, and that very well could indicate, future rulings to come.
So I kind of want to, we'll get back to the precedents being set. What about the, because a friend of mine had a good point last night. We were chatting and he was like, the overall response to Roe v. Wade has been relatively mild compared to, something like summer 2020, which he says is a that's a bad sign. That means that they're scheming. That we haven't seen it. We haven't seen the outright summer of love burn everything down. What do you think's going on? I mean, we have elected officials coming out and saying the Supreme Court is illegitimate, that we have to reject it. AOC calling to get in the streets to not, I guess, not address or not, I guess, not recognize the Supreme Court. What is going on there? Are we looking at another summer of love of billions of dollars of property damage and killing cops?
I mean, just really hard for us to tell. I think right now we're still kind of at the beginning of the summer, June 30th here today. With a lot of summer left to go, 4th of July weekend coming up. So we're really going to have to see. But I mean, talk about that summer of love and mostly peaceful protest stuff, to the Arizona legislature, Senate in this case, that was in session this past week when the mob descended upon the building, banged on the doors, tried to get in, had to be restrained by law enforcement. That could repeat itself. Surely, those who wanted to preserve Roe v. Wade will be scheming. But the point is that the Supreme Court has spoken and returned, that responsibility to the states. And there are already states which had what they call trigger laws, which meant that they anticipated such a ruling coming from the Supreme Court, and that when it was handed down, as it was this past week, that those states then would automatically enact legislation that would restrict abortions, maybe anything before the 15th week of pregnancy and other limitations like that. And we can see that already in this short period of a few days, activist judges have already stepped in some of those states to put a pause, a block on some of those trigger laws, and those will be litigated further. So we've got a lot of, I think, litigation, a lot of activity in the courts coming up. But in the end, I mean, the Supreme Court has spoken on this, and however long it takes to sort it all out in these various states, the authority has returned to the states, which means to the local level where the connection between the people and those whom they elect to office is a lot closer than between them and the federal government.
Can we speculate wildly and think about what are these? Because there's been 3 recent cases, right? The concealed carry, if I'm correct, Roe v. Wade, and now EPA. Could we predict any future cases, or is this maybe a couple of shockwaves back to back? back to back to back.
Well, let me add one more case that just came to mind for me, and that was the ruling in this case by the New York State Supreme Court that ruled that a state law passed by the New York State legislature
Oh yeah,
permitting illegal aliens, non-citizens, to vote in local elections was unconstitutional. So, I mean, once again, if we're going to predict, if there's a theme, this is what I'm, thinking about today here, is a return to originalism, to textualism,
Gotcha.
to a reading of the Constitution at the Supreme Court level anyway, based on original construction, original text.
And then that fifth one, that the football one.
Oh, right, out in Washington State.
Yeah, right. The football coach that wasn't allowed to pray on the field after whatever it was you can't. I guess the limitations that were put on that were deemed unconstitutional because it's a violation of the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say that's 5 for 5, seemingly all pretty close together. That have been
there's always a flurry of decisions handed down at the end of the term, and indeed this is just before 4th of July. This is the end of this term of the Supreme Court, and then they go into summer recess. So it's typical that
par for the course.
Flurry of rulings is handed down at this point in the calendar.
So am I naive to think that if there are any challenges to 4 a.m. ballot drops in the coming midterms, that they will actually make it to the Supreme Court, unlike 2020, where they were just shot down and said no case possible? Is it, or am I hanging on to a sunk ship?
Well, I don't know that those cases necessarily will make it to the Supreme Court. A number of states, quite a number of states, have enacted new legislation in the wake of what went on in November of 2020 to ban things like ballot drop boxes, mail-in balloting, to demand to legislate the requirement for voter ID, for example. And I'll add something else, and that is that after Dinesh D'Souza's movie 2000 Mules came out, a number of places, sometimes we're talking about counties like Yuma County, for example, in Arizona, sometimes a bigger jurisdiction, a state, have opened investigations.
Yeah,
I mean, legal official investigations into what went on based on the evidence presented in that movie. So what I see as a positive and a hopeful trend, if you will, is that at the local level, and for many reasons, I mean, not just Dinesh D'Souza's movie 2000 Mules, which was eye-opening, but also other presentations. For example, I don't know if you or the listeners maybe have had a chance to watch some of these legislative hearings. And another one was just held out in Arizona this past week, Maricopa County, where the absolutely brilliant polymath Javon Pulitzer spoke again about various very specific issues and questions about the electoral process, especially there in Arizona. So what I'm seeing is that at these local levels, and because of these various different things, the hearings, the movie, the whatever, that people are ever so much more aware of what went on in the lead up in the the election year of 2020, lead up to November, and are stepping up, not just themselves to run for office, like, let's say, school board or library board or city council or what have you, but also to step up and be trained to be poll watchers and election officials for the midterms coming up this year in November 2022. So that level of participation by citizens is what you really want to see. And it's heartening to see, and it is happening. And that's what's going to make the difference, I think.
Who was the founding father? The quote, I'm going to butcher it, but it was like the best bulwark against tyranny. Something, it's like, wasn't even the Second Amendment. It was like a well-informed and aware populace. You know
Well,
what
I'm
I'm
not
talking
sure
about?
which one you mean, but it sounds right.
Like a well-educated and
I mean, liberty is only defended by eternal vigilance. Thomas Jefferson.
a republic if you can keep it.
That's an approximation of that quote.
I gotta find it now.
That's right up here. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. I'm looking up on the little saying I've got with a magnetic up on my file cabinet. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Maybe that's something like that. But yeah, absolutely. And maybe we as an American people had slacked off a bit and not paid as much attention as we ought to have had. But I think as we ought to have. But I think that's really changing now. I'm seeing it at the local level, and I think that's really important.
Sometimes you have to slack off and get burned or get a kick in the ass before you kind of get back to it. Sometimes you have to like, see yourself from a different angle in a picture and go, oh God, I really have put on a couple pounds. And you go, all right, okay, enough of the cheese doodles. You're like, okay, noted, got it, good.
Put the Cheetos away.
Exactly,
Step away
right?
from the Cheetos.
Step away from the Cheetos with your hands up, right? But you kind of have the like, I should get it back in the gym. I know I'm older, my metabolism's slowing down. Like, yeah, but it's kind of all these things, and then like you maybe like
says the 31-year-old.
Okay, well, I was 18 and I could take a day off of Cheetos and I'd have an 8-pack. So in my mindset, I'm an old archaic machine. But the point is you have these things that you should do, right? It's like right after my concussion. I was like, I don't need to take this that seriously. And I was trying to do a podcast and I like couldn't remember the name of like, it was probably like you or Dale, like people I have on every week. And I was like, okay. So, but one of the quote, an educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free populace. Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, you found it. Okay.
Yeah, so
very
it's
much so. Yeah,
that is a huge thing where it's like you have to. I mean, really, it's a fancier way of saying, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it.
Well, we as Americans have lived through. I mean, you could say a post World War II period. Put it that length of time. In which there was rising prosperity overall.
Oh yeah.
There was maybe a kind of a complacency that crept in, that we thought kind of things were on autopilot and we didn't have to pay all that much attention. I mean, obviously, race riots in the 60s when our cities burned down, and other events, 9/11 for sure, definitely got our attention. But overall, I think there was a sense or a feeling that our institutions were still functioning and functioning well. And in fact, that wasn't so. They were slowly eroding and being eroded, actively corroded by malign forces, including the forces of Marxism and communism. But we didn't notice it because perhaps it was so gradual, and now we do.
It's kind of like that moment when you grow up and you realize your parents are just people, and you're like, oh, it's not mom and dad. You're like, oh, they're people too. Like, they're terrified. They don't have all the answers. When you're a kid, they're invincible. You get older and like, oh, dude, they're balancing checkbooks too. Like and it's this sort of, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, oh, they're just people. I mean, like, you go, oh,
these are the common things that families have to do.
They're not gods. When you're little, of course they are. They control your life when you're 5 years old. And that's kind of what it is like the big white columns of the whatever building, the Supreme Court or the FDA or the CDC or the DOD or DOJ or whatever. And you go, oh, these aren't infallible. They can be, they're made up of people, and you can boil the frog. You can't take it on in a year, but you can over 50 years. You can slowly turn up the dial. And then you don't, it's one of my favorite analogies. It's the tsunami analogy. I think it was Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, who talked about the way new technologies arise. It's much like a tsunami. There's a shifting of tectonic plates in the middle of the ocean. It creates a massive shift in water, and a wall of water is moving towards a coast. And unless you're looking at it with satellites or early warning buoys, you don't see it. Even when it's on the horizon, when it's overcome the curvature of the earth, you still don't see it because it's a uniform line and it's just coming at you. And it's not until it starts to break and it breaks onto land. But if you take the lifespan of a tsunami from the moment it was created by the shifting plate to the crashes ashore, think of like the 2004 one in Indonesia. You can find all those videos. The actual crashing is like 1% of 1% of its lifespan. But it's not correlated. It's been coming. And that's kind of how I look at maybe something like 2020 in its entirety. A lot of things seems like, in my limited wisdom, seems like it was the manifestation of things that have been coming for decades.
Well, they absolutely have. We've talked, I think, with you before about W. Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communist, and the clearly articulated 45 goals of communism today, which were presented by communist and maybe former communist witnesses to the different hearings held in Congress early 1950s. That's where they came from. But there was not an awareness, or maybe there was an unwillingness to look at our fellow Americans as motivated by malign forces, maybe even co-opted by those malign forces like communism, then Soviet, now Chinese Communist Party. We don't want to look at fellow Americans that way, but we need to, because this is how republics are destroyed from within, not necessarily by an assault, an attack, invasion from outside.
The fifth column.
But corroded from within by the betrayal and the treason of, I'm sorry, our fellow Americans sometimes, but under the influence of an external force. Here now, the Communist Party of China, under that strategy and program aimed at us, but that Americans succumb. Americans are co-opted. They are betraying their country, and we just didn't want to believe that, but we have to.
Kent Clisby, former CIA, talks about it in his book Willing Accomplices. A huge thing is to provide it's almost like plausible cognitive dissonance or something. I'm sure I'm butchering whatever term it was, but it's the person you're co-opting, no matter how much they're on board with communism, there is a part of that person, for the vast majority of the cases. Sure, there are some psychopaths, but the vast majority of people, despite how on board they are, there is a part of them that's saying, I'm betraying the people to the left and right of me. And what you have to do is provide them any sort of just shred of truth or whatever in order for them to grab onto and then be able to develop their own cognitive dissonance. Like, this is for the greater good. This is for, like, yes, it's painful betraying your fellow countrymen, but it's for the yeah.
That'll work with some people. I'm not sure that's the majority of those who betray their country.
Okay.
They long ago, gave up any shred of integrity and honesty.
That's the other thing Clisby goes into.
Loyalty to their country and their fellow Americans in return for whatever it is they're being provided, be it money, be it professional recognition, admiration, plaudits, whatever it may be. In return for that, they are absolutely willing
Well, that's
to go down the wrong path.
And maybe I'm being too giving them way too much benefit of the doubt. Regardless if they have a bit of cognitive dissonance or not, I think they should all be hung from the neck till they're dead. But Clisby calls his book "Willing Accomplices" because he goes, and there's a lot. He's like, and make no mistake, there are a lot that there's no, you're not fudging the numbers. There are a lot that know exactly what they're doing, and they are enemy combatants. But much like a vaccine or an inoculation, and this is the optimistic, wide-eyed Tommy. If it doesn't kill you, you can produce long-lasting immunity to it. If we can get out of this, we will come back stronger. If it kills us, it obviously isn't going to help. But it can serve as a kick in it. I don't think it's a death knell. I think a lot of people think it's a death knell and the country is over. And maybe they're right. I don't know.
No. I mean, go back to what we started out today with, and those were the hopeful signs. I really do think that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. To kind of shift from there now, any more expectations on a date of invasion by China to a Taiwan? That's one thing I've been focusing on. That sounds so like privileged and detached. Well, kind of bored of the Ukraine. I'm more focused on China, Taiwan.
Yeah, no, we're looking back, of course, to the May 14 leaked audio recording of this meeting that took place in Beijing among top leadership of the Chinese Communist Party and officers of the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, and in particular those from the coastal province of Guangdong. And in that audio, we heard those officials talking about moving China from a civilian, a peacetime status to war footing. And the time frame given was that in this month of June, now just passed, the beginning of the organization, of the administrative organization, as well as production of certain things like military equipment and weaponry would begin, and that the date, target date for takeover of Taiwan would be October of this year, 2022, no later than November, which also, by the way, is the month when the current party chief, Xi Jinping, stands for re-election by the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party to what he hopes will be a third term as the party leader. And along with that set of plans for invading Taiwan, those at this meeting on the audio tape talked about clearing the South China Sea, perhaps more than that, East China Sea, Sea of Japan, Philippine Sea, but out to the first island chain, out from the Asian mainland, meaning that there of necessity, if they do that, would be conflict in international waters with shipping of the United States, naval and otherwise, and of our allies like Japan, like Australia, like the Philippines. So that's the background to this. And since then, what we've seen is what looks to me increasing aggressive behavior by the PLA. For example, flying together with Russia, nuclear-capable bombers over the Sea of Japan, while the U.S. President Joe Biden happened to be in Tokyo earlier this month as a demonstration. Things like the attack, I think maybe we talked about it in your show, but certainly in others I did, the attack by the PLA's Navy against a coral reef, basically consisting of some great big rocks sticking out of the water, but administered, claimed by Japan, and surrounded those rock outcroppings, not inhabited, but surrounded by concrete structures called tetrapods, because 4-footed concrete things that were intended to protect the outcroppings of rock from waters of high tide, washing over them and maybe even submerging them. Anyway, the Chinese attacked those concrete structures, destroyed them, leaving the outcroppings of rock to be maybe swamped over by waters of high tide. And one more example recently was when a Chinese military fighter jet released chaff. This is iron,
like
metallic bits.
Yeah.
In the very close vicinity of an Australian surveillance plane, not a fighter jet at all, but a surveillance aircraft, in a way that the chaff could have, and maybe some of it did, get into the engines of that Australian plane, could have caused it to crash. Thankfully, it did not. It was able to land. The pilot was able to land it. But so these are just some of the recent examples, along with, incessant overflights of Taiwanese airspace by Chinese fighter jets, and the recent declaration from the leadership of the CCP that the Strait of Taiwan is not international water, which of course, according to the UN's law of the sea, it is, meaning that US and other vessels freely can pass through it at any time. So all of this seems to me to be ratcheting things up, ratcheting up tensions, ratcheting up provocations, trying to goad the Japanese, for example. I wrote about this in a Newsmax blog of mine, goad them, into some, military reaction, a military response that really in an atmosphere as tense as this could set off conflict. So those are the updates that I can think of for right now. But it seems that Xi Jinping and the top leadership of the CCP are very much determined to achieve this objective of taking over Taiwan, and in coming months this year.
I didn't know about the nuclear capable bombers flying nearby when Biden was that's,
provocative. Yeah.
That's definitely a sign of no fear.
No respect anyway.
Yeah.
But I'll add one thing to that, and that is that as your viewers, listeners probably know, the Japanese since World War II have called their armed forces defense forces, and very much, according to the Constitution, limited the development of certain weaponry and so forth for that military. Always putting it strictly in the context of defensive armed forces for the defense of the homeland, of the homeland Japanese islands. Well, the senior leadership of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense of Japan, and the Prime Minister himself, Fumio Kishida, they've all issued repeated statements over these past weeks and months, warning in pretty explicit terms, warning Beijing that an attack on Taiwan will be considered a national security threat to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the geography and how close the Japanese islands, some of them anyway, lie to Taiwan, you can see why they would be making those statements. So in an attempt at deterrence, obviously, US providing training and defensive weaponry, more of it, to Taiwan. But you know, the theme of all of this is ratcheting tensions, and that is concerning.
Well, we look back at this, of course, because you have a crystal ball. Are we going to look back at this in a year or two and say it was all bluster? Because I mean, even in my short life, there's so many times where, I've heard like, oh, this is going to escalate into World War III, and then it doesn't. And that's not to say
Well, I
I'm
mean,
let down by that.
remember what a lot of leadership,
Well,
Western
before
European
World War,
leadership, NATO leadership, US leadership, were saying before the February 24
yeah,
this year, 2022 invasion by Russia of Ukraine, that they were not sure that would happen. And there are plenty of reasons why it might not have happened, including all the results that we see right now, which is the devastation of the Russian military, the destruction of its economy, its relegation to pariah status, taking its leadership to the International Court at The Hague for war crimes, all of that, thought perhaps to have been deterrence to launching that attack in the first place, but then they did it anyway. And all the results that everybody foresaw as potential deterrence played out. So obviously the Chinese leadership is watching what's going on in Ukraine. And with regard to the Western, especially US, but NATO, response to that invasion. I'll mention one other thing with regard to NATO, and that is that for the very first time, senior NATO leadership, I believe Stoltenberg, actually was talking about an extension of NATO interests to the Far East, to China. And if you think about warfare now, I'm reading, for example, retired General Robert Spalding's second book right now. I'm just about done with it.
I'm trying to get him on.
But he lays out, he goes through the 1999 PLA's book, Unrestricted Warfare, chapter by chapter, and gives really good insight analysis of those chapters. Well, the point that he's making, as I'm getting towards the very end of the book, is that as NATO is now realizing, warfare is not geographically constrained necessarily anymore. And certainly in the CCP unrestricted warfare concept of warfare, everywhere and everything is a battlefield.
Yeah.
So for example, what if the Chinese were to unleash a massive cyber attack in cyberspace against one or more NATO countries?
Is that Article 5?
Is that an attack on all that would trigger an Article 5 response? What if Beijing were to launch an attack in space against some of our satellites? Is that a trigger, excuse me, a trigger for Article 5 of NATO? It's not on Earth. It's not tanks or planes or ships or troops, but that's an attack, very much so on the national security of whoever, satellites those are, right? So the concept, the way we think about warfare has to change.
Yeah.
It's not just, the kind of warfare that Russia is waging against Ukraine, which in a lot of ways is kind of a throwback, a primitive kind of a throwback to an earlier era of imperialist expansion,
invasion and tanks
and destruction, and
it is kind of old school.
That's not how the Chinese think about warfare anymore, and haven't for a long time. Warfare is everywhere, and if you read Unrestricted Warfare, it's in space, it's in technology, it's cyber, it is trade, it's economic. So Robert Spalding's point in this book, which I really recommend, is we have to shift our thinking. And he as a matter of fact, retired from his career at the Air Force as a pilot.
Yeah, B-2 Spirit pilot.
because he could not get senior leadership at the Pentagon and the DoD
He was,
to understand modern concepts of warfare. They were still stuck in a von Clausewitzian, paradigm of warfare. And their little brains couldn't grasp the magnitude of the expansion of the battlefield in this 21st century. And he could, General Spaulding does, and retired in order to precisely write books like these, speak, and explain the kind of warfare that we're up against now. So all of that by way of looking at Taiwan, yeah, that's a geographic entity. There are boundaries to the South China Sea, yeah. But the battlefield is way beyond that.
yeah, he was removed from Obama's National Security Council because he was raising alarms about the Belt and Road Initiative and their monopoly on 5G infrastructure in, I think, South America and Africa. I read his first book, or I guess I don't know if it's his prior book, Stealth War.
Yeah.
And I had him on for that, I think, episode. If anybody wants to go find it, episode 160 something. And I'm trying to get him on for his new book, but I can't get him.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's called War Without Rules. War Without Rules, which is another way kind of saying unrestricted warfare, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what he laid out. That's what he laid out in Stealth War. It was like it's not going to be the columns of tanks and the 100 battleships on the horizon. It's like it's economic, it's currency manipulation. It's closing down ports, it's choking up supply. It's and what he calls it in this, I think it's like opening page, is a beautiful war that's being brilliantly executed. Like, you have to respect him. He's like, it is the most lethal cutting edge form. It's not what anybody expects. But in that sense, yeah, you have to wonder, does that extend to Article 5? You got to wonder, I mean,
at what point?
Yeah. I mean, is someone sitting on evidence of COVID being leaked intentionally because they're fearful of it causing World War III? Would that not be Article 5? I mean, what, 7 million people worldwide are dead? Would that not be Article 5? If they're in NATO countries? Yeah, you got to wonder, where does it start? And then, do you even want it to be that liberal? Like, do you want something like a cyber hack to cause World War III? I mean, leading up to World War I, it is kind of eerily similar to where we are now, in that so many heads of states and professors and generals and business tycoons are saying it can't happen. We're all too interdependent on each other. It's unthinkable because it would never happen. We would all lose more than we gained. And the rest is history. And you kind of hear it now, like, there can't be World War III. We're too interdependent. I don't know, man. We did it twice before with that same mindset. It cannot happen. Well, until it happens. I don't know.
Yeah. So we're back to gloomy.
Oh God. Do we have anything else positive, or was the Supreme Court the positive blip?
Yeah, I really do take that as a positive going into this 4th of July weekend.
I think it is.
And I am rooting for South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, whose request for a permit from the National Park Service to have a fireworks display at Mount Rushmore for the 4th of July was denied for absolutely no reason except that the Biden administration doesn't like her. She has appealed, and we shall see.
They really do hate this country.
They do. Absolutely.
They genuinely hate this country, and they hate them. And it's almost, if I didn't hate them so much, it'd almost be kind of sad, because I think it stems from a place of self-hatred and betrayal. But they really hate this place.
Yeah. I can't think of any other way to put it.
Well, on that, Ms. Lopez, let's wrap this one up. And I do think that there's overall positive tone. Like, those 5 cases aren't nothing. That's a huge trend.
Yeah. That's
genuinely that's all jokes aside. I mean,
Yeah. Antonin Scalia is smiling down from someplace right now.
Yeah, he's not spinning. He's not spinning in the grave. He's perfectly
No.
still and happy. That's not nothing. That's not speculation. That's not someone announcing a candidacy. Those are 5 concrete things that just got handed down by SCOTUS. Like, I'll take it. I'll
Mhm.
take it. You can't be greedy. I'm happy with that leading into 4th of July. I'll take the little win. And Miss Lopez helping me wrap this up. Anybody listening, podcast will resume next week. I'm going away for 4th of July, as you all should, and celebrate living in the best country in the history of man. And if you don't like it, move to China, you dirty commies. Ms. Lopez, I will put the links to all of your stuff. Your writing, your article, your Twitter in the description. As always, guys, please go check it out. And I imagine we'll resume next week.
Awesome. I wish you and all our listeners and viewers a very happy 4th of July.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Miss Lopez. You're the best. Everybody else, take care. God bless America.